Alright guys, you are ending out your week today with a review, which is a little weird because that means you're going to have a test as your first thing next week, but I know you'll be totally fine with that. I want to make sure that you are only watching this video once you are done solving these review problems on your own. Also, hopefully you read the little memo that I wrote down that you are totally supposed to skip problem number 21, because that is not something that I had you do this time around. I had you skip line plots. So hopefully you read that and you were able to solve this and you are now ready to grade this along with me. Okay, so I'm going to start at the top. It always starts you with some vocabulary, and number 2 might have been a little tricky. I do apologize about that. So it says, choose the best term from the box. Blank are 2 or more fractions that represent the same part of a whole, and those are called equivalent fractions. So I'm not going to write that, but I'll just match those 2 together. And then this says a graph that shows data on a number line. It's called a line plot. That's the one that I had you skip for now. And then a blank is separated by a decimal point and shows the whole number part on the left and the fraction part on the right. That's just a straight up decimal number. Okay? So let's look at numbers 4 through 6. So this says Leonard bought a large water bottle and Natasha bought a small water bottle. They each drank half of their bottles, and did they drink the same amount? Well, your big answer there is no, and the reason being is that you can't compare things that are not the same size. So kind of the answer that was given in my little book that's always helpful, it says, because the bottles are not the same size, half of Leonard's large bottle is going to end up being more than half of Natasha's small bottle. So it's because they're not the same size. So something along those lines. No, not the same size. Okay? And then for number 5, it says explain how to compare 3/4 and 3/5. This is hopefully a lesson where you, although there's a few different things you could say. Here's kind of what I would love for you to say on this one. 3/4 and 3/5 are not comparable at the moment because you've got 2 different denominators. So I would love for you to figure out how to get these to have a common denominator. And the way we could do that is multiply 4 and 5, which gives us 20. So 5 to 20 would be times 4, which would make this 12 20ths. And then 4 to 20 would be times 5, which would make this 15 20ths. And that means that 15 20ths is going to be larger than 12 20ths. Okay? So hopefully if you wrote an answer of some kind, you could tell me that you came up with a common denominator. Oops, denominator. All right? And then number 6 says is 1/4 equivalent to 3/8. And same deal, you're going to just show this using common denominators. So 1/4 and 3/8 I cannot compare yet, but what I can do is I can change this 4 to be 8ths. That way I get to keep my 3/8 the same. 4 to 8 is times 2, so 1 times 2 is 2. And then I can see that 3/8, oopsie, is greater than 2/8, so I would write that like that. And as far as an explanation goes, you could say something like, the numerator and denominator need to be, the denominators need to be the same to have a common denominator, and then that way you can compare your numerators, and 3 is greater than 2. Something along those lines. No big deal. Alright, so for 7 and 8, they want you to simplify your fractions, and I know you guys struggled with this a little bit. The hardest part about simplifying fractions is just knowing what number to choose, and really what you have to do there is you got to know your multiplication facts, which in turn then help you with your division facts. So what I mean by that is I basically have to ask myself to find a common number that I could divide both 9 and 12 by. And so you could think about what all your common little factors are, and I know that I can divide both a 9 and a 12 by 3. So if I were to divide the top by 3 and the bottom by 3, that's going to be totally fair because I'm changing it kind of at what we call the same rate. So 9 divided by 3 is going to be 3, and then 12 divided by 3 is going to be 4. So then my last job is to just check to see if there's anything else. The only thing I can do to make 4 smaller is to divide it by 2, and I can't divide 3 by 2, so I know that I am done. Now for number 8, you've got a couple of options, but I actually think this one's easier if you do it in 2 parts. The very first thing that you can do is you can divide this by 10. Any number that has a 0 on the end of both of them, you can first start by dividing it by 10, which really means you just slash off one of those zeros to make this 8/10, right? Well now, my problem, the reason that I know that I'm not done yet is because these are both even, and I can always divide an even number by 2. So I'm going to divide both the top and the bottom by 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. Now the reason I know I'm done now is because there's nothing I can do to make 5 smaller, and 4, again, I can only divide by 2, and I can't divide 5 by 2. So I am all done. Okay, we're going the reverse way this time. Number 9 wants you to write equivalent fractions. And if you'll remember, an equivalent fraction, all you have to do, whatever you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. So if I were to multiply these both by 3, I would get 3/15. So that could be one equivalent fraction there. Maybe I take 1/5 and I multiply the top and the bottom by 2. So 1 times 2 would be 2, 5 times 2 would be 10. So 2/10 is also equivalent. I can multiply it by 10. So 1 times 10 is 10, and 5 times 10 is 50. That would work. I can multiply it by 5. 1 times 5 is 5, and 5 times 5 is 25. And then I could also, let's just choose 6. I could do 1 times 6 is 6, and 5 times 6 is 30. These are all numbers that mean the exact same thing. They're all equivalent to 1/5. Okay, moving on. This one wants you to look at some number lines. So this is label the point for each fraction or mixed number with the corresponding letter. So here I can tell here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 little hash marks there. I also then have 1, 2, 3 hash marks there. And so that could be my thirds. These could be my sixths, and then obviously you can still have a half there. This would be my half. So that's going to help me out here. I'm going to erase those though because they're in the way. So this one wants me to do 1 and 2/3. Well, first I need to get somewhere between 1 and 2, and then this is going to be 1/3, and that would be 2/3. So my letter A is going to be right there. For B, it's 5 and 1/6, so that means I need to be somewhere between 5 and 6. And then it says 1/6, so that's going to be this little one right there. For C, it wants just a half. That means it's not going to be more than 1. It's somewhere between 0 and 1. And the very halfway point between those two is right smack in the middle. We'll label that with a C. Next I have D, which is 3 and 5/6, so that's going to be somewhere between 3 and 4. And then 5/6 is going to be this guy right here. We'll make that letter D. And then finally, E says 4 and 1/3, so this is going to be between 4 and 5, and my 1/3 is right there, which would make that letter E. And then the last one, it just wants to ask you which fraction is closest to 4. Even though this one's over 4, this one is technically closest, so that letter would be D. Okay. So let's look now to our question number 11 and through 14, which just wants you to write these in decimal form. This is the most recent stuff that we've done, so this shouldn't be too hard. Reminder for you, though, you're looking at your labels. So these are tenths, hundredths, 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 okay? So 74 hundredths means it's going to be less than 1, and it's got to end in the hundredths place, so that would be 0.74. Your 8 and 3/10, your 8 is going to be your whole number. Everything else is less than 1, so you need that decimal point, and then that 3 should end in the tenths place. For number 13, you've got 12 as your whole number. Everything else is less than 1, so I need that decimal point. And then this is for hundredths, which means I need to have a place value holder here to show me that there were no tenths. So that would be a 0. And then for number 14, 21 and. 21 and. And then it says 35 hundredths, so you would write 35. All right. I apologize if I'm moving way fast. I just want to try to get all of these graded by the end of the video. So remember, you can always pause and reflect on what I've been saying so you have a chance to get that down, okay? This one wants us to compare, and the hardest part about these is that we're going to need some common denominators. So I'll walk you through for 15 and 16 on what your common denominator could be. I know that I can change fourths into twelfths, so because of that, my 8/12 is going to get to stay the same, and I simply just need to change my 3/4. So I'm going to come down here. How do I get 3/4 to equal something over 12? Well, I could do 4 times 3 equals 12. So because of that, I'm going to do times 3 to the top. Whatever you do to the bottom, you got to do to the top, and 3 times 3 is 9. So this 3/4 is the same as 9/12, and I know that 9 is larger than 8. So that one would be bigger. And then over here for 2/3 and 8/12, same exact thing. I know that I can turn thirds into 12ths. So my 8/12 is going to get to stay the same, and all I need to do is change my 2/3. So how do I get from 3 to 12? That would be times 4. So that's the same thing that I need to do to the top. What's 2 times 4? That's going to be 8. So that shows me that these two are actually equal. Okay, let me erase a little bit of that. And let's come down here to number 17, which wants us to compare some decimals. So a good reminder for you, you are looking always at your first number that's, so we could look at ones place first, which was zeros. And then I have a 7 in the 10th place here and a 7 in the 10th place here. So I need to move on to my hundredths place. Now on this number on the right, I have a 5 in the hundredths place. And for the one on the left, I can add a 0 to the end of this and it won't change my number. And that helps me see that 75 is larger than 70. For number 18, you've got a 4 in the 10th place and a 2 in the 10th place, so that 4 is going to be your larger one. For number 19, you've got 8 in the ones place. You've got a 0 in the 10th place, but a 4 in the 10th place here, so 8.40 is going to be larger. And then for number 20, I have a 5 in the 10s place, and there's no 10s, so I already know that that one is larger. Okay. I told you to skip problem number 21, which I'm sure was great news for you. And then I'm going to come down here to questions 22 and 23. And it looks like I'm just looking ahead, and it looks like I accidentally forgot to screenshot questions 24 and 25. So maybe I'll just talk you through those ones. I apologize. But let me look at 22 first. It says the shaded part of the model represents the number of pennies that Nate has in his jar. It wants you to write the number of pennies Nate has in his jar as a fraction and as a decimal. Well, here first I see he's got 1 whole, so that's going to be 1. And this is going to be my fractional part. And then this will be 1 whole, and that's going to be my decimal part. So I just now need to come over here and figure out what he's got going on. Well, here I see that he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 full bars shaded. And if you'll remember, those bars represented tenths. And he's got no more hundredths. So because of that, I know that it's 1 6/10, which I could also write down as 1.6 as a decimal. I also could have written this as 1 60 hundredths, or 1.60, and they're all equal, so it wouldn't matter. For number 23, a pad of paper has 100 sheets. Helena has 4 full pads, and then 53 loose sheets. So you got to think about what's going on. 100 is just helping you figure out your fractional part. And then it says she's got 4 full pads and 53 loose sheets of paper. But it technically wanted this to be a decimal point. So this is just going to help me write my decimal. That's 4, and then 53 would have ended in the hundredths place. So now, like I said, I apologize, but it looks like I didn't take a screenshot of that problem. So I'm just going to talk you through 24 and 25. Number 24 said, ooh, what did I do there? That was weird. There we go. Number 24 said, Vaughn bought 10 tomato seedlings. He has 7 seedlings that are cherry tomatoes, and the rest are plum. And it wants to know what decimal number shows the fraction of tomatoes that are plum. So you're basically finding the other part of this that will equal 1 full, and that's going to be 0.3. So your answer to number 24 would be 0.3. And then number 25 is really, really long. I'm going to give you the rundown rather than reading all this to you again. It basically says, did all of the team members run the race in the same amount of time? And the answer is no, because you're comparing everything. So it says Sarah, Min, and Lana all ran the race in the same amount of time, because 31.9 equaled 31.90. Let me write some of that down. Oh gosh, I don't have any time. 31.9 does equal 31.90. But then we have here a number like 31.9 and 31.09. So that's going to be where we have a different answer, because this shows me no tenths, whereas this one has a 9 in the tenths place. So sorry for not having a screenshot of that, but hopefully that can kind of help a little bit. So Because you're done for today, if you did your actual assignment, which was to do the review before you watched the video, if for some reason you didn't, you should go back and finish some old IXLs or some old homework options, okay? Log into Zoom if something didn't make sense. Otherwise, I'll talk to you later.